Hi, this is Jeremy Schuback, and I want to briefly take you through the new updates in Photoshop CS6 so you can figure out whether or not it's worth updating for you. So this is the new interface. You can see it's dark. If you don't like the dark interface, it's something that's really easy to change right here. You can see you can switch from this interface back to the original, or even lighter than the original. I believe this is as light, or something even darker right here just inside of the preference panels. I actually really like this new dark interface, and I'm sure the only reason they've avoided doing this until now is because of this new dark interface. They actually need to have two different icons. Check out the icons when I do this. It goes from like the inverted to the normal that we're used to. So now they actually have two icons for every single feature, just so the interface looks as good as possible. In fact, if we were to go to the light interface and go over here, I just have a side-by-side comparison of CS5 to CS6, and you can see how they just kind of slightly tweaked out all of the different interface items, so it's all a little bit nicer. However, fact of the matter is there's absolutely nobody in their right mind who's going to update a program because everything looks a little bit nicer. In fact, this is the real size. They made all of the icons bigger. Nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about that. It's nice. It's nice. I'm glad to have it, but you're not going to update because of that. In order to see all of the new things in CS6, I'm just going to go to Workspace, New in CS6, and all of the new things pop up. So let me briefly go through what we're looking at right here. Bridge, or mini bridge I should say, actually works now. So as opposed to before where it was like really slow to load, I'm sure they rewrote the back end, something like that. So now I can load things in and it actually works, and it might be something that I integrate into what I'm using. Layers. The big changes inside of layers is this bar that's up top right here. So you can actually sort it so you only see text layers. I don't have any text layers, so I'm not going to see anything. You can only see color adjustment layers. You can only see graphic layers. You can only see smart layers. You can only see vector layers. You can make it so you're able to sort through. There's even an option, so if you name things, you could type in, here, let's, background. And I only see my background layer pop up, or boy. So I'll have files that have hundreds of layers. I can just search for them right here, which is really nice. Things that are in different effects, things that are in different modes. It allows you to really mess with your layers a lot more, which is nice. Even better than that, something that I love that they've changed inside of the layers plan is you can right-click and you can change multiple layer colors at once. When you group layers together, I'm just going to group them together, you can actually add a clipping mask to that group. Now that only affects people who are really doing massive amounts of layers at once, but that's a really, really cool feature right there. You can do color adjustments to groups and not just to individual layers. And something else that you can do right here is you can duplicate groups with just a quick Control-J. Although I have to admit, I'm doing it right now and it's taking forever to load, so it looks like the code behind this is still a little bit wonky. New in the adjustment thing is this one thing called a color lookup, and I really, really like this. So if I go into layers, and I'm going to double click on color lookup, and it allows me to say I want a crisp warm look, or I like a 3-strip look, or I want a moonlight look, and it allows me to just immediately drop to this. Before this point there's been a lot of soft warning look. There's actually been a lot of third-party things that allow you to do this, and now it comes with Photoshop, and that's just called a color lookup, and they call it a lookup table, as you would expect from an actual movie lookup table. So you can load in LUTs, 3Ls, .looks, .cubes. You can load up various color things, which is great for people who want to preview video briefly. The character options are great. You can add ligatures now, so you don't need to go to InDesign or Illustrator to do that. And actually, they have built-in paragraph styles and built-in character styles. If you don't know what that is, you're probably not going to be using them, quite frankly. If you do know what those is, you'll know, awesome. It's really cool right there. Brushes, the big thing that I see that they did with brushes is if you go to here, I'm going to just create a new layer right here and go to brushes. If you go to the mixer brush tool, as opposed to it taking forever to load, gross, it actually looks like it's taking forever to load. This example was supposed to work perfectly. Unfortunately, it looks like it just froze my computer again. I think that's because there is a color adjustment layer on top of it, so it's taking a while. I'm going to pause this and continue it up now that it's loaded. That took about a minute for it to load. It looks like something went really wonky. I'm going to raise this above all of the color adjustments, and I actually thought this was working. It looks like they haven't actually increased the speed of the mixer brush too much, although allegedly they've improved a bunch of things with the brushes. I'm not going to talk about them too much. Below this, I really love what they do here. As opposed to calling it the animation panel, it's called the timeline panel. Let me jump to an image where I can actually show you this working really well. So what I have right here, let's go to this right here. And rather than the timeline down there, I'm going to actually jump it down to the bottom. And you can see they have completely redone their timeline tool. And it is so much better now. Like, it is just incredibly better. I'm going to jump off to CS5 just to show you how different it is from before. So that's not CS5. This is CS5. Check this out. It is awful. Like, in order to increase things, you have to do things like this. I'm going to jump back to CS6. Things are running a little bit slowly. And I want to show you the exact additions that are added inside of the timeline. So it's called timeline, not animation. You can do things such as hit the plus sign and then add an image inside of this same timeline right here on this layer. So we can actually control that at this point of the layer, the image is going to look like this, and at this point of the layer, it's going to look like this. The timeline has actually been integrated. Really, really important. They now have a scissors tool, so I can hit this and split this apart. Was not able to do that before, and that is game-changing. I can also do things such as hit this button right here and add things such as phase, crossfades, phase to black, fade to white. I mean, they're basic things, but they're things that did not exist before. So listen, this feature right here, if I wanted to draw over this animation, just kind of a fun little animation that I did right here. If I want, it is so much easier to do as opposed to in CS5 where, it's clunky, it takes a while to load. The timeline actually works now. So listen, if you're using Final Cut, even if you're using, if you're using iMovie, this actually adds a lot of dimensions because, I can add a new layer right here. I'm just going to add a new layer. Notice that it's on right here, and I can just draw on top of it like this if I want, and I can make it so this only lasts a single frame. I can, move this here, hit another layer right here. Again, oops. Okay, well, obviously I don't know what I'm doing quite yet with it. It would take a little bit of getting used to. But you can see how, just with that right there, this is huge. And if you look, you can turn on things like onion skinning. There's a render video option. There's actually a render go-to right here that has, a Foley. Like, you can render it whatever you want, H.264, you name it. I'm not going to open it up right there. There's shortcut keys specifically for the timeline. This isn't going to replace Final Cut. It's not going to replace After Effects or anything like that. But if you want to do a brief video, say a brief tutorial video, you could easily do it inside of this. And that is really impressive. So if you want to do brief video here, Photoshop has really stepped up its game. It's a viable tool, and it's not just a clunky mess. The other thing that it went from being a clunky mess to a viable tool is 3D. And I'm not going to go into 3D in too much depth, but let me just show you one thing with it. Let's say I do a type layer, so I'm just going to type in text. There we go. I don't know how 3D and animation are going to work together. I'll probably blow everything up. And let's just go to the Move tool, and I'm going to go up here where it says 3D, and you can see the majority of 3D is actually, they've changed most of this to a big deal. New 3D extrusion from selected layer. So let's do this. And when you do this, it actually changes all of the menu items to 3D menu items, so it's a little bit simpler to use. And then you can see that it actually has a 3D interface, which is much, much better than before. Now again, I'm not going to get into the major 3D, but if you've been using Photoshop for things like texturing, if you've been using graphical elements for 3D, it is so much better. Just look at the drop-down for 3D here versus looking at the drop-down in CS5. Here, let me just, nothing works. They've made it so much better. And honestly, that's a big thing for me. It's not what they've added in, it's what they've taken out and made to work better. So I'm going to go back to Window Workspace, new in CS6, and show you one other thing, and it's the Properties panel. And instead of them having a bunch of multiple windows for different things, they have a single thing called the Properties panel. And you have mask options, color adjustment options, and even 3D camera options all pop up in this one thing called the Properties panel. So let me skip to a different image. Here we go. I'm going to go to this one right here, and I'm going to go to my layers. And let's say I have a layer. Let's add a little bit of a mask to it right there. If I jump to my Properties panel, options for masks are right there. Now, even cooler than that, here, let's drag out layers so it's right here. If I were to also have, If I were to also have a color adjustment right here, go to the properties. This is now color adjustment. Go here. This is now masked, and it's just the same window that does that. So it's just a little bit of a simplification of the interface. So cool things that they've added. Mini Bridge works now. Brush is slightly better. 3D is significantly better. Video is significantly better. The interface is a lot suave. And then they've also done a few other things. So let me show you a few other things that they've done that are really nice, that I'm a fan of. Let's get rid of this, and let me go into, I lost my layers. Let's go to layers. Here we go. Drag this back here. Wonderful. And get rid of, I don't even know what's going on. So much crap. Okay, so there we go. So we just have this back right here. Double click on this. So a couple of other things that they've done. If you go into, click on this. If you go into filters, you'll notice they've taken away a lot of them that they've had since like version Photoshop 5, not CS5, Photoshop 5. So they took out the artistic, they took out the sketch, and oh, thank God, that has been needed. The reason they took that out is because they put in something called oil paint. And the way oil paint works is you mess with the options. I'm not going to do that right now. And it does similar things to what the artistic ones were doing, only this one actually looks halfway decent. And, listen, it's still a filter. There's no doubt about that, but it is a really cool looking filter. Like, I don't know. I find it very cool. I have a layer on top of this just to show you the difference right here. It took it from this to this. Which is pretty neat. Like, it's still a filter, but look at what it's doing with this tree. From this to this, that's pretty cool. And I think what they realized over at Adobe is this is so much better than any of the artistic things that they had before. They just needed to get rid of those. Something they also did is they made Liquify work. So now if you're using Liquify and you do say, here, let's go to a stroke, it actually works as a stroke. You don't need to wait a million years. It actually works. So that's pretty cool, not that I ever use Liquify. There's other things in here that are kind of nice. They do a lot of things with blur, iris blur, tilt shift blur. Like tilt shift is an option built in. I haven't messed much with the lighting effects. There's some cool things there, I'm sure. Adaptive wide angle. There's some lens correction things. If you're getting the fisheye lens, that's built in right now, which is kind of nice. And there's a filter gallery, which is better than it was before right there. 3D is different. So those are the major differences. There's one other thing I wanted to show you here. Let me put on that color correction right there. So again, the major things were 3D, video, brushes, text. I mean, this is a lot of stuff. The one other thing that they added that a lot of people were talking about, the thing that everyone seems to be talking about, is this right here, the content-aware move tool. So let's go to the right layer, and let me show you how well it works and or doesn't work. So if I'm going to make a selection with this, and we're just going to make it a pretty rough selection because in theory you don't need to have all that specific of a selection. And in fact, let's make it a slightly better selection just because, hey, why not? Let's give it the benefit of the doubt, and I should be able to move this over, just a few centimeters. I don't want to really tax this tool too much, and it should be able to just work and fill in this empty space. So let's see what happens. I'm going to let it load for a little bit. This tool takes an absurd amount of time to load. Actually, we're doing this real time. I was going to skip ahead, but we're doing this in real time. It doesn't take that much time. I'm entirely impressed. And you can see right here, listen, this is not perfect by any sense of the imagination. But let's say I add a new layer and quickly use something such as the new patch tool with content aware set to it. So this is something that didn't exist in CS5, I want to say. So I'm just going to take all of this right here, content aware, sample all layers, and I'm just going to drag this from here to here in order to correct this right here. That was a pretty bad job of correcting it. And then Control Select, you can see it's significantly better. And then if I were to go to yet another one, the Healing Brush tool, again setting it to current and below, and just set this right here. Okay, this is not a one-click solution, but I have to say it does a much better job and does it much faster than the other versions. So, I'd need to play with it a little bit. It's not an instant fix, but it did do a pretty cool job. I'm actually very impressed with the Content Aware Move tool right there. So these are the big additions that are in CS6. So should you buy it or should you not buy it? That's the question that we're asking right here. Here's why you should think about buying it. If you've been doing anything with 3D and you want it to be that much better, this is significantly better. If you want to do video in Photoshop, listen, the old version didn't really do video except for adding in frame animation. You can now do video in Photoshop pretty successfully. I mean, limited video, but video. If you want to do more typography inside of Photoshop, you don't want to go into InDesign, you don't want to go into Illustrator, there's a lot you can do here. I didn't talk about vector tools, but it actually really increased its vector capabilities as well. I assume most people who are doing heavy-hitting vector are going to be using Illustrator, but this tool makes it a lot more viable. Photoshop's vector tool doesn't, suck anymore. 3D has been integrated. Brushes are only slightly better. That's not huge. Mini Bridge is way better. So should you buy it or should you not buy it? It's all a lot more fluid. It goes a lot faster. I'm a big fan. I'm not saying whether you should or shouldn't, but those are some of the additions that are being made that I actually think are really cool and really relevant. So this has been Jeremy Schuback, and those are some of the new features in CS6. Thanks for joining me.